The Bible never fails to generate controversy. Never. It seems to depend upon who's doing the reading and how they interpret what they read. So there are arguments all the time. Was the Bible divinely inspired and divinely received? Was it divinely inspired but humanly received? Was it written by the Holy Spirit or by the hands of the authors that are listed, and so on? Constant upset and uproar. Get rid of that in your own minds, okay? That's not the point of the Scriptures. I feel personally that each New Testament author wrote about events the way he was used to writing about things. I do this my way. Even when I put a sermon together, I put it down in my words, in my way, after much prayer, much study, much research, much everything, but still it's me doing the writing. So it tends to have my flavor and method of writing attached to it. Matthew's gospel was written this way. Matthew was a publican, a tax collector, a very organized man, if you will. If he'd been a bookkeeper, everything would have been neat and in order. So he wrote topically. He had topics, and then he would fill in under the topics representative events of the things that happened. Why couldn't he write about everything that happened with Jesus? Because Jesus was one busy guy. And nobody could have, the whole world couldn't contain the books if all of it was written down. You'll find that in John, by the way. I preached on it last Sunday. What I mean here with Matthew is that grouped in certain subjects, those are the ways that Matthew organized events. So Matthew did it his way with topics. The Gospel of Matthew in chapter 8 and chapter 9 are really kind of representative of the things that were done in the life and the ministry of Jesus. So I'm going to read from the Scriptures here in Matthew chapter 9, verses 35 through 38. Jesus went through all the towns. Catch that? Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. See why he was busy? He didn't sleep a lot, I don't think. When he saw the crowds, here's the point that's going to be part of today's sermon. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field," which is precisely what a lot of us simply don't do. If you sit down and read the Gospel of Matthew beginning to end, you say, boy, did Jesus keep a busy schedule. And he did. Let me assure you that no living person ever has been able to measure up to that rigid discipline that Jesus did, and yet no one, because of it, touches the lives of so many people. Yet in spite of Jesus' crowded schedule, it's recorded in all kinds of places in the New Testament, he always was willing to offer a helping hand to anybody, regardless of their need or their social status. So in Matthew chapters 8 and 9, Jesus is healing the following people. Okay? A leper, a centurion servant, Simon Peter's mother-in-law, casting out demons in several people who were possessed by them. He calms a stormy sea. He's crossing the Jordan, casting out demons in 2 men, and then he crosses back west over the Jordan River again and heals a paralyzed man. calling a man named Matthew to come and follow him. He's healing a woman who's had a hemorrhage for 12 years. He's healing the daughter of one of the city rulers. He's healing 2 blind men, and he casts out demons in a mute man. Hey, listen, he did a lot. Everything Jesus did was to help people physically and mentally and spiritually, one way or the other. Now, the close of Matthew 9 gives us a bit of a summary of everything that Jesus did, and you'll find it's a threefold ministry, and preachers apply it even today. Teaching is one aspect of it. Preaching is one aspect of it. And healing is one aspect of it. They remain the cornerstones of our religion today. So Jesus was tender-hearted, and he identified with the people. He saw them as those in great need. In short, their suffering became his suffering. Jesus felt so strongly about this part of his Christianity that he literally commanded his followers, if you would, to get into the action by going out and spreading the message to others. The implication here is staggering to us today. Let me lay out for you what this is in modern terms. The world is and always has been spiritually sick with sin. Always. It's always been separating those who are sick in their spirits from God from those who are well in their spirits because of God's gift to us named Jesus. All people are in need of the spiritual healing of Jesus the Christ. Everyone is. And this is where we modern people rise up and we shout, well, gee whiz, when did we ever see Jesus poor and sick and lonely and hungry and in prison and so on? Let me point out to you when that happened. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, I'm in chapter 25 and starting with verse 31 in Matthew. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. When did we help Jesus? When we help other people. The entire world's out of step. You know why? Because Jesus saw the multitudes, and he saw confusion, and he saw compassion in his soul. He felt that he had to give a great commission to us to go out and to help. So we know what we see, don't we? When we see these great crowds in great needs. How about the nightly news on television? How about the nightly news? They had an article a few days back on one of the news blurb programs with, I call these people talking heads. I'm sure that's all I ever see of them, and they talk. Okay. And they were saying, now we go to our correspondent in Africa, and they named some country. And they said, we're talking about people who are starving to death in very matter-of-fact terms. You know what I was doing while I was watching that?
Eating.
I was taking delivery of a nice Diet Coke and a sandwich my wife had fixed for me. And guess what I did while I watched it? I drank my Coke and I ate my diet sandwich. And I never once felt a compulsion to put it in an envelope and mail it to the hungry people of Africa. We're divorced from this. It's part of our problem. we are divorcing ourselves from the real needs of the world. Jesus saw confusion in the people he looked at. Well, gee whiz, why not? Those were the Jewish people he was talking to, and they've got a long history as God's people. They've got a long history of belonging to others, too. They've always sought security. They're a country that needed a country and never had one for a long, long time. Right now they're being ruled by Rome, but the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Egyptians haven't done too shabbily with them. Had they known how the game is played, which apparently Seattle did not know how to play, had they known how the game was played, they'd have seen themselves as a political football. I know, I saw those sad looks on your faces mentioning Seattle. I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm a Denver fan too. Of course they're confused. They're being batted back and forth by politics. They're being kicked around by international politics. And they're even being led by false messiahs, Acts 5, 36 and 37. Some time ago, they disappeared, claiming to be somebody, in other words, the Messiah, and about 400 men rallied to him. He was killed, all his followers were dispersed, and it all came to nothing. After him, Judas the Galilean appeared in the days of the census and led a band of people to revolt. He too was killed, and all his followers were scattered. Therefore, in the present case, I advise you, leave these men alone, let them go, for if their purpose or activity is of human origin, it will fail. What do you think? Antichrists are new to this nation of ours? Are they new to the world? Of course not. We've always had people like this who wanted to lead others astray. I'll tell you what, people, I frankly don't see much difference between Israel then and those of us today. The real issues are being obscured by their familiarity and their treatment as merely news items on TV. The fights are centered on things like gun control, when the real issues are insanity and hatred and evil and starvation and power and control and wars and just plain sick thinking. For years in our own nation, we've walked a fine line between peace and war. We've built an arsenal and an army that is of unprecedented size and power and quite able to wipe out every living thing on the face of this earth, including the animals, if you will. And yet all the time that this has gone on, since the late 40s, we've talked about a peaceful coexistence and peace among the nations. What, walk softly and carry a big stick? How about walking loudly and carrying a huge atomic bomb? Sounds the same to me. Seeking peace by building a war machine seems to me to be a dispersal of effort. We've gone the wrong direction, barring any recent reverses, if you will, in our situation. Most of us now have more material possessions than we've ever had before. That's true. More than we ever thought possible. But we lack the time or often the health to enjoy them. Uncertainty rules today. Seems to be our motto. Moral convictions that we've held for years as a nation are now going by the wayside. These are convictions that we deem necessary for life. You'll find them in our Constitution. And now they're being dropped by the wayside in favor of permissiveness. Do whatever you want as long as it feels good to you. Black and white decisions have now faded to gray. The landscape's full of gray things out there. where nothing is really wrong as long as you get away with it. Of course there's something wrong with this nation. So what am I getting to here? Listen, the very definition of sin has changed. That's what's wrong. And people changed it, not God. Sin now consists of getting caught, not in simply performing the wicked deeds. Israel's confused, you bet we are too. And how sad. No wonder Jesus saw confusion. It's time we saw confusion too. When Jesus saw confusion in people, he felt the need to have compassion for people. When we see it, we retreat into feeling superior. Okay. Yeah, they killed 700 people the other day in a little nation somewhere in Africa. Thank God we don't do that here. What? We're letting our ego take the place of our morality and our concern and our compassion. We're a Christian people. Look, a young TV star was picked up about 3 or 4 weeks ago driving a $400,000 sports car while he was drunk. Okay? Well, really, I'll tell you what, I went on the internet, got online, and I looked at the news for about 3 weeks back, and trust me, he wasn't the only one young TV star that got picked up drunk. Okay? Had Jesus been the one to hear about this, what would Jesus have done? We're the ones to hear about it. You don't happen to have another ham sandwich in there, do you, Carol?
Yeah.
See the difference? And I'm as guilty as anybody else, and so are all of us in this entire nation. We've divorced ourselves from true compassion into a feeling of superiority. Thank God we don't do that here. Oh my God, you hear about that? Hand me another Coke. We've made a mistake, and it's time we reverse it. The case I'm making here is this. People during the time of Jesus were so crushed by their rulers, they were so disappointed by life, and they were so heavy-hearted, and they had no aim or purpose in life, and they're drowning in insecurity and fear. And Jesus, when he looked on them, had compassion. We've got a whole world out there that needs our compassion. Jesus saw things with the eyes of God. We don't see things with the eyes of God. We see them with the eyes of mankind. Listen, we've walked the streets of a lot of cities. We're fans of cities, okay? We like to go to different cities. Each one has a flavor all of its own. So you want country music, you go to Nashville, okay? You want really upscale shopping and a couple of really outstanding public services, go to Chicago. We can spend all day on the lakefront, okay, and have many times. And if you want the best lobster you ever had in your life, go to Noank, Connecticut, down on the waterfront, and you'll find a little screened-in porch down there. And they go to their boat and they pick up your lobster and they say, well, this would do, that's the place to eat. Okay? Trust me. That's the place to eat. Or you could go on the St. Lawrence Waterway to a little hotel with some sort of unpronounceable German name to it. Okay? And we had my mother with us, and she said, are you sure you want to stop here? Because the paint was peeling and the porch was kind of sagging on one side. And yeah, we did, and I have no idea why I insisted on it. We stopped, and it was absolutely the best down-home cooking we ever had in our lives, except maybe here in the church, of course. And it was special. Sometimes we'd cover up. We'd cover up with the ease of our lives. Jesus saw with the eyes of God. We shake our heads and ignore the need. Too much to do. You know what we haven't done? I'm not saying this to make y'all feel guilty. I said this to make you feel guilty. I'm wallowing in guilt myself. I'm saying this to point out to you what we've forgotten to do. We have not prayed to the Lord of the harvest to send workers to help us out. Surely we ought to have enough compassion ourselves to ask God to send others to help us do this job. We cannot do it alone. It can't be done alone. It's an overwhelming job. When I was younger, I set out to save this entire town for Jesus. I'll tell you what happens after about 30 blocks and 2 pairs of shoes. Okay? Suddenly you find out the job's way bigger than you ever thought it would be. And so still half the town out there doesn't even go to church. At the most, you have 400 people on most Sundays who go to church. Where's the other 400 or 5 or whatever it's up to now? Are they sitting at home? You know what the difference is? The difference is between this God-man named Jesus and the people just like us. Okay? The difference is that Jesus let Matthew know that he could write a whole book about the life of Jesus because this good in Matthew could be cultivated and given hope and love and compassion and purpose if it was done so in Jesus Christ. And that's why we're here. We're here because God's let us know through Jesus that we too can do good in spite of our own fallacies and downfalls. The difference is caring and love, compassion. So here's what Jesus did for his followers, including us. Jesus gave everybody a commission. Jesus saw the good. Heavens, Matthew was a publican. Okay? Luke was a doctor. John wrote about love. Mark we're not sure about, but we do know that a lot of people say that his gospel was one that was copied by others, and perhaps parts of it were. There's something here we have to realize. Ordinary people just like us wrote this Bible. And they're inspired by the Holy Spirit, and they're guided by the Holy Spirit, and they're divinely given all kinds of answers. These people were uneducated for the most part, and they wrote as if they had PhDs 10 times over in the subject of Jesus. Listen, I'm going to tell you something that happens, and you need to be prepared for it. When you excite the emotions of people, when you excite their emotions that are meant to lead people to salvation, then you better make sure that their actions follow those emotions, because there's an old expression given here for truth. Impression without expression is depression. Impression without expression leads to depression. Jesus is pointing out here the possibilities for service in his kingdom by taking care of people both physically and spiritually, teaching them how to be saved by Jesus the Christ, teaching them what sin really is. The Jews hid behind their confusion, and they saw a lack of leadership even in Jesus. They wanted a king with a big horse and a spear or sword, okay? And what they got was a meek man who let people kill him and never complained one single time. What they were getting was the same thing we get. We got a Lord of love, a God of love, a person of love, a person of compassion, who teaches us to love in spite of ourselves. I mean, here they wanted the big horse. Here we demand the big house. What's the difference? Something's wrong here, folks. Jesus called more workers to the harvest of souls, and we say, after the Super Bowl, and after my nap, and after my supper, and after my snacks, and after my easy living, and listen, fellas, if you want to be taken care of, get a set of crutches, okay? Wives have a lot of sympathy towards crutches. You know what Jesus didn't do? Jesus did not go out and rent an office in Galilee and put his hours on the front door and hang out a shingle that says Jesus saves and waited for the people to come to him. He didn't do that. Jesus instead didn't even bother with an office. He went to the people. And I think that's the example that we need to follow. Jesus went to the people, and so do we. So where did he see Zacchaeus? Up a tree. Where do you see a man named Matthew? Collecting exorbitant taxes. Yeah, right? Where do you see a man named Saul, who, by the way, was a killer of Christians? On a road. Where did Jesus see you? I think Jesus looks at us right now. He sees us in church. God bless you for being here, by the way. Okay? He lets us know that we can do the job. We're ordinary people. We can do the job. So he says, Harry, you got one leg left. Get out there and hobble along. Well, isn't that true? He didn't ask me to make excuses. He asked me to do the job. He didn't ask you to make excuses. He asked you to do the job. He didn't say, oh, by the way, find something else to do besides the job of saving souls, because I know that's what you're good at, and I know you can't talk to people, and I know you're embarrassed. Stop that, because that is defeatism of the worst order. You've defeated yourself. Instead, what we must not do is not ignore the job. We can't ignore it. It needs to be done every day of our lives, and I don't think you have to make some special, great, big effort. I think you just have to go meet people. And I think you need to be happy while you're doing it. And God forgive me if I ever go out and meet people and complain about my leg. May God strike that thing black and blue. Later, God, I'm having trouble with it today enough anyway. God loves us so much. It's time we love Him back the way He wants. Love is an action word. It's a verb. It's not just something you sit on the shelf and have. It's something you use. We need to come alive in Jesus. We need to do more than ever before, because at our current rate, not only is the world sinking fast, but this church can sink fast. And we need to do our share. Now listen, we're starting something new. I know we're on the air. We're on YouTube. Teresa can tell you how to get there. I can't, okay? I'm computer illiterate. In fact, the guy at the computer store who was fixing my little laptop computer, all I wanted was so when I touched one button, it came up and said internet. That's all I wanted. If I have to touch two buttons, I can't do it. Okay? She was no help. She was standing on the other side of the guy who was behind the counter, and she was laughing at me. Okay? I know. Not the brightest computer guy in the world, right? Would you believe, and this is true, that in 1962 I used the first computer at Southern Illinois University, which covered a full city block, was underground, enclosed in glass, and air conditioned and heated perfectly. And after 8 hours of operation, I got back 7 cards with holes punched in them. And I had to return those to my mind and go back through and figure out what I had. And that was my master's thesis. Okay? You were 68? About 68? Yeah, 67, 68. We're commuting from Chicago for her master's degree. Which don't do that, okay? Move where you're going to be. Now, here's the point. Went in for hers, and I helped her write her thesis and did all of the paperwork, math, and everything that was required on her thesis in about 10 minutes with a keyboard. Computers had evolved that much in that length of time. So I take my little laptop, which happens to have more computing power than was available to the first men on the moon. Okay? And I take it into the guy and I said, here, I want one button. And he kind of sneers at me, and I give him the addresses and everything I want in it, and he hands it back in about 8 minutes, and he said, punch it. And I punch it, and it comes up and says, internet, and I go, bank, and she's down there going, okay. Modern life has interfered. It's interfered with us. We've become modern people who like to take it easy. And it's time to become Jesus people who take it seriously to get others to confess Christ. I call you to Him. I ask you to call others, tell you how you do that. Listen, there's something you can do here. This is an outline of today's sermon. Take this outline home and a couple other copies with you and hand them out to people, so they'll hear the same message. Maybe like Nicodemus, they'll get all excited and say, how can it be? Jesus explained this to me, and Jesus will.